There is nearly insurmountable evidence that this current administration is seeking to end the Fed this term. Yeah, that's right. It's happening. We have one of the most insane news days in simply Bitcoin history today. Planes crashing, politicians clashing. What is going on? Are they trying to distract you or bury a major story? I think so. Stay until the finish because history is rhyming. And if that is indeed the case, you better get ready for the bull run of a lifetime. We're talking $1 million Bitcoin in 2025. Are you ready to... Then let's go! Send it!
There is no other power greater than the power over money, the power to create and contract the money supply, the power to control the purchasing power of your money. Throughout history, this has proven to be the most sought-after monopolistic power of man. And it has become more sophisticated over the decades and over the centuries, more sophisticated now and more international in scope than ever before. So I see the issue of power and the control over money as being something that we cannot ignore, we must address. I believe closely associated with this is the issue of morality as well. By what moral right we have to create purchasing power out of thin air? Whether it's done by the creation of credit or Federal Reserve notes, or whether it's the creation of SDRs in an international scope, by what right do they do this? Is it any more moral to dilute the value of your purchasing power of the money you hold in your wallet than it is for the farmer to dilute the milk supply with water? I would say there's an issue of morality here just as strong as the issue of power.
There is no second best. He was right then and he's right now. And before we get into the happening, let's dive into the news, which is absolutely insane. But stay with me because it all connects to the centralization of power and control and why the Fed's reign of terror is coming to an end. Let's get started here. I know you've seen the news about the crash. Total tragedy. Heart goes out to all affected. But when you look at the location, the timing, as well as like a Black Hawk with enhanced technology to prevent such occurrences, well, you start to get a little curious. So with this taking over the news, I wondered what would they be trying to distract people from? Or what should be a major headline right now that's totally being ignored by the mainstream media? Well, I think I may have found it. According to this post and the clip transcription, you can see the accusations. This is serious stuff. As of now, there is no verified evidence to support these claims. It is something that they are apparently looking into. We will continue to monitor this story for any official statements or further developments. Please remember to seek updates from reputable sources for the latest verified information. That'll be all on that for now, but let's get into some other power plays that are taking place. How about that absolute meltdown in the RFK hearings? Here's a brief summary of events.
Say you're pro-vaccine. Just want to ask some questions. And yet your organization is making money selling a child's product to parents for $26, which casts fundamental doubt on your usefulness.
What's incredible about these things is you get to see their true colors. Take a look at Liz and Bernie go absolute apeshit. Then we're going to reveal why that was the case. And Dave Smith had some absolute fire on this. But first, check out the shit show.
Are you supportive of this?
I've had nothing to do with
Are you
leadership.
supportive of these onesies?
I'm supportive of vaccines. I'll comply with all the ethical guidelines.
That's not the question. You and I, you have said
You're asking me, Senator, you're asking me not to sue vaccine pharmaceutical companies. Yeah, you are. That's exactly what you're doing.
RFK was just trying to hold it together. These people are the absolute worst. Now, why did they attack the leader of one of the most highly supported bipartisan movements in American history? Oh, that's right. Yes, it's because they don't care about the people they represent. They care about the people lining their pockets. Roll it.
The dynamic is much more like the corrupt versus the not corrupt, liars versus honesty. That's the dynamic much more than it is left versus right. And when it really matters and it comes down to it, and somebody like Bobby Kennedy is a threat to power, and you see literally, quite literally here, the powerful coalescing around keeping this threat to power out, right? The senators keeping out the dissident potential health department secretary. When it matters, where's Bernie Sanders? He's on the side of power, being a fucking blowhard, giving this bullshit speech, trying to make Bobby Kennedy look bad. That's where Bernie Sanders falls down, as always. The guy LARPs as a representative of the people. And whenever it comes down to it, when it really matters, he falls in line with power. Just like when he endorsed Hillary Clinton at the DNC in 2016. He had this huge movement, this mass movement of people who hated big banks and hated the billionaire class rigging the system in their favor and hated the forever wars. And he got them to support Hillary Rodham Clinton. You know, the person who gives speeches for $500,000 to big bankers and tells them in those speeches, don't worry about what I'm saying publicly. I say one thing publicly, but I say a different thing privately to you. Look at what the Libertarian Party just did with Donald Trump. We got Ross Ulbricht freed because, look, we represented a voting bloc and he wanted to court us and he knew this was a thing that we wanted. So we were able to get a concession out of him in exchange for our support. You know, like it or no, don't like it, that's politics. Bernie Sanders had tens of millions of Democratic voters in the Democratic primary. And then Hillary Clinton and the DNC cheated him out of it. The WikiLeaks dump had come out by the Democratic National Convention. They knew, and he had so many chips. He could have sat there and said like, well, you know what? I'm taking my voters and walking, and we will cost you this election because we don't believe in people who, you know, we hate the big bankers and the wars and the powerful and all this shit. Or he could have at least extracted some serious concessions. I mean, if we could get Ross Ulbricht free, he could have gotten almost any damn policy promise he wanted to. And what did he do? He got none of that and just told all his supporters to go support Hillary Clinton. When it comes down to it, Bernie Sanders is not a dissident. He's always on the side of power.
Now let's get to the bullish news. It is not hyperbole that 2025 could be the year of $1 million Bitcoin. And it also isn't hyperbole stating the president is laying the foundations to eradicate or just make the Fed irrelevant. It's not always what is said, but what is done and what is signaled.
You know, I think that everything's on the table with Bitcoin. And you know, to me, one of the most exciting things about Bitcoin is for a generation of investors who maybe post the great financial crisis have been looking for investment opportunities, or maybe they'd soured on markets. Crypto is bringing in young people. It's bringing in the people who haven't participated in markets, and you know, having a market culture in the U.S. and people believing that markets work for them is a centerpiece of capitalism.
All on the table. And that was the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, and they are now studying Bitcoin to implement the strategic Bitcoin reserve. And who is leading that effort? The Bitcoin senator. And she wants to do this.
We wouldn't have to spend any new dollars. We have reserves at our 12 Federal Reserve banks, including gold certificates that could be converted to current fair market value. They're held at their 1970s value on the books, and then sell them into Bitcoin. That way, we wouldn't have to use any new dollars in order to establish this reserve. The United States already holds over 200,000 Bitcoin in the asset forfeiture funds. So that would be the initial source of Bitcoin. So no new money spent on this reserve.
Now, do you remember when Trump hilariously said this?
Do you expect the Fed to listen to you?
Yeah.
Well, check this out.
You know, banks are perfectly able to serve crypto customers as long as they understand and can manage the risks, and it's safe and soundness. A good number of our banks that we regulate and supervise do that. You know, the threshold has been a little higher for banks engaging in crypto activities, and that's because they're so new. And you know, we don't want to make the mistake. If you're making a choice to conduct that activity inside a bank, which is inside the federal safety net with deposit insurance, then you want to be pretty sure that it's a safe and sound activity. So, you know, we're not against innovation, and we certainly don't want to take actions that would cause banks to, you know, to terminate customers who are perfectly legal just because of excess risk aversion, maybe related to regulation and supervision.
We're in week 2. Let's review, shall we? Free Ross, and apparently he may be already getting to work. Trump signs executive order to investigate strategic Bitcoin reserve. SEC rescinds. SAB 121 allowing banks to custody Bitcoin. Federal Reserve says banks are perfectly capable of serving Bitcoin customers, and this is all within 10 days of the Trump inauguration. So when Bitcoin's favorite Apple says, "Hear me out, this time isn't different," you know the Apple isn't fucking around, and the inevitable is near.
It's this joke, right? Maybe it's Einstein said it. The reason we need time is so that everything doesn't happen all at once. You know, you might be frustrated it's not happening too fast, but you don't want it to happen too fast. If I said to you, guess what? Everybody watched Michael Saylor's talk and everybody on Wall Street agrees with him. And so they all bought Bitcoin. Tomorrow morning, you would wake up and Bitcoin would be $8 million a coin. And what would you think? You would think, dang, I should have bought more when I wish it didn't happen so fast. You don't want it to happen that fast. Right now, we're in this very ideal situation. We'll remember this time period fondly. We'll look back at this. Bitcoin trading at 26,000. We all know what's about to happen. We all know corporations are going to adopt it. Wall Street's going to adopt it. We know the ETFs are coming. We know the capital is coming. We know everyone's going to wake up and figure this out, but they don't have the ability to buy it yet. So you know the future, but it has not manifested itself in the price. You're going to wish, for these days back, because these are the days where you can work in a job at McDonald's and you can make whatever X dollars an hour and go buy Bitcoin. And one day, you'll look back and say, I was actually making the equivalent of $8,000 an hour.
Now, the big question, is the end of the Fed nigh? I believe so, my friends. But did you hear that? Did you really hear it? Trump there was speaking on moving towards pre-1913 policies. Now check this out. Was this the game plan from day one? And are we in the middle of the sly roundabout ending of the Fed? Well, I thought so. And I went to Grok to verify that I wasn't completely deranged. And the cyborg seems to be on board as well. Check this out. I started off by asking if there was any evidence Trump was looking to make the Fed no longer relevant, what steps he would take, and if the strategic Bitcoin reserve and ending the income tax are part of that process. Now, when it began, Grok was a little pessimistic. Basically, it was like, keep dreaming. Grok thought it was all speculative, etc. at the beginning, so I tried to educate him a little bit. I said, hey, go back in time, look at Trump's current Bitcoiners and anti-Fed people in his cabinet, who he surrounded himself with. And then I asked it again, are we going to end the Fed or make it irrelevant? Grok did confirm that Trump has been frequently critical of the Fed and even suggested a desire for more presidential control over the Fed, which again reduces its independence. Then Grok kind of went into Trump's journey being anti-Bitcoin, what it was like with Mnuchin and Kudlow, but then it moved to the current scenario. And we can look at this. We have RFK. And again, if you go look at his Bitcoin conference speech, I think it is the best speech on Bitcoin ever delivered, whether politician, whatever. But in my opinion, RFK is a major figure and leader in the liberty movement. Then we have JD Vance, who even came on and said he's starting to espouse more of the Ron Paul philosophy when it comes to the Fed. We already know about Elon Musk's view on the Fed. The man loves Ron Paul. Not to mention Vivek, huge fan of Friedrich Hayek. David Sachs is in the mix. But even after this, Grok said ending the Fed highly unlikely due to legal and institutional frameworks. And then we got into some of the policies. The current strategy appears more about challenging the Fed's traditional dominance in monetary policy, though alternative economic tools like Bitcoin, rather than outright ending it, this approach aligns with a broader narrative of reducing government control over economic mechanisms. And that got me to thinking about Ron Paul, and Elon retweeted that post where Ron Paul said it's time to wean ourselves off the Fed, just like the mainstream media. But getting back to this with Grok, we got into the SBR and the income tax. So if you were going to end the Fed, I asked it, isn't that part of the process? Here's what Grok said. Yes, the process of making the Federal Reserve less relevant or even moving towards ending it could indeed involve several strategic steps that we did highlight. The steps is part of ending the Fed, undermining independence. And we can see this happening with Trump right now. The introduction of alternative monetary systems. We are already laying the foundations and the infrastructure being able to roll out of it. Fiscal policy overhaul. This goes back to those pre-1913 policies, eradicating the income tax and moving towards tariffs again. Number 4, legislative and policy changes. I think we can see those are in the works right now all over the world. As we just talked yesterday, the Czech Republic, their central bank is looking at buying Bitcoin. This is absolutely insane. Now, this is what I liked here. So the incremental approach, given these constraints, any move towards ending the Fed would likely be incremental, starting with reducing its influence or role, then potentially leading to more significant changes if political and economic conditions allow, which is why it's important to educate people. And we continued. So I said it looks like they're working on building the infrastructure and now building the public support to be able to achieve it. Even Grok said it appears there's an effort to build both infrastructure and public support that could eventually lead to a significant reduction in the Fed's traditional role, or in an extreme scenario, end it. And what would that look like? Infrastructure, the adoption of Bitcoin on federal, state levels, and individual levels, the banking sector, policy and legislative changes happening at a record pace. Again, we are just 10 days into Orange Man's reign. Public support, rhetoric, and messaging, educational campaigns, winning in policy. So this is just changing the hearts and minds and bringing that education, putting it out there. And with Trump talking about pre-1913 policies, people will wonder, well, why did we ever do this shit in the first place? Why did the Titanic really sink? I don't know, guys. I think we're onto something, and so are a lot of others. Rapid fire time. Lagarde and the EU choose poor. GFY. Hello, FASB. Tesla marked up its Bitcoin holdings, booking a $600 million gain, pushing shares up 4.2%. I wonder what happens when MicroStrategy with 45 times more Bitcoin follows suit with FASB. Bullish. Norway's central bank fund reveals owning $500 million of MicroStrategy shares. Breaking. Texas Strategic Bitcoin Reserve is now a legislative priority and has received a very symbolic bill number, Senate Bill 21. It's beautiful. Larry Fink confirms he was climbing Mount Stupid 5 years ago, and the Kazakhstan president Tokayev calls for the creation of an infrastructure for broader legal circulation of digital assets to move the majority of cryptocurrency users out of the gray zone, as only 5% currently use regulated platforms. Is the #1 exporter of potassium coming on board? And would you look at that? Senator Bob Menendez. Yeah, the guy who said only criminals use Bitcoin was just sentenced to 11 years in prison for taking bribes in gold and cuckbucks. Absolutely wrecked. America's embracing Bitcoin, and it's becoming glaringly obvious the entire financial system is going to be built around Bitcoin. This is fucking genius. I also believe this idea originates from none other than friend of the program, CJ Constantinos. Roll it!
We combined a seasoned multifamily asset in Philadelphia, about 50 meters away from the first bank of the United States, the one that Alexander Hamilton started. We combined that asset with around 20 Bitcoin, and we provided a loan to refinance the existing mortgage on the property, to provide the asset sponsor some funding for capital improvements, and with the remainder to buy the 20 Bitcoin.
Okay, we got to go backwards.
Go ahead.
You got to go backwards. We're just going to slow the whole thing down so everybody understands what happened. Okay. So there's a property.
Yep.
Physical property.
Multifamily. Right. Multifamily. 63 units.
It's a multifamily property. The sponsor, effectively the owner of that property.
Yep.
Needs a loan.
That's right.
Okay. They come to you.
That's right.
Okay. You say, we'll provide you the loan in the form of
a loan.
A classic loan.
That's right.
Okay. So you're going to give them cash.
That's right. Term financing.
Term financing. And how long's the loan? Just
10 years.
10-year loan. Okay.
That's right.
At above market rate or below, or what's
no market rate interest rate?
I'm just trying to slow the whole thing. Okay. Now let's introduce the Bitcoin piece into it.
That's right.
So no. Explain how the Bitcoin piece then relates. So the loan has been provided.
The use of proceeds is to pay off the existing financing. So
the use of the proceeds
of the loan is to retire the existing mortgage.
Right. So there's an old mortgage.
Gone.
They're going to pay the old mortgage off.
That's been paid off.
Okay.
Now they have a little bit extra money to make some improvements in the property.
Right. So a little bit extra cash. So the amount of money you've lent pays off the old loan.
That's right.
It's also you have a little bit of extra to fix
Improve
stuff up.
the property, fix stuff up.
Yep.
And then with the remainder, which is a little bit
so you
more.
have even a little extra, an extra turn.
And that, instead of cash out, it's Bitcoin in. And we use it to purchase some Bitcoin and add it to the collateral package of the loan. So now our loan is supported by both the traditional asset, the 63-unit apartment building, and the Bitcoin.
Okay. So the loan, it was maybe $2 million more, so that's how you get the Bitcoin out?
Exactly right. So it's
on the assumption that the Bitcoin's going to rise faster, and that will become an asset.
Over the life of the loan, for sure. So we think on the downside, this provides us with much better protection compared to a traditional lender, because a traditional lender, if something goes wrong, they have to recover against that particular building, which is idiosyncratic risk. Something might happen with the maintenance or what have you.
But that also requires conviction on your end that Bitcoin is not a volatile asset over time, and that is either going to go up or at least stay where it is.
Well, that's by fusing the Bitcoin with credit and by fusing it with traditionally financeable assets, it gives us the luxury of expressing that medium-term view on Bitcoin, and that's what's key. It's volatile in the short run. You know, I mean, minute by minute today, who knows? It could cross 100,000. That would be exciting.
How long's the loan?
10 years.
10 years.
And the minimum hold period for the Bitcoin is 4 years. So what we say to the borrower is we say, look, you can repay the loan at any time for any reason with no penalty, which is a really valuable feature compared to a traditional loan.
Yeah, that's like a home mortgage.
Like a home mortgage almost. That's very unusual for commercial financing. But what we do say is that to the extent that the loan is repaid at year 4 or earlier, the minimum will release the property. But the minimum length of time that the Bitcoin has to stay in escrow is 4 years.
Ignore the noise, my friends.